Okay. Hey, everybody. It's another day today on Cosmic Mama's show. And today we have a special guest, Dr. Tafur, MD. And got his book right here, The Fellowship of the River. And he is also the founder of Modern Spirit, where he's bridging science, spirit, and medicine, his nonprofit. And he's also running his newest course, the River Course, that you can check out. And today it's kind of going to be interesting because you're probably going to see us change outfits. So it's we're splicing it in. We started this last time and my son had an MRI and had to run out the door. So we're just doing this portion over again real quick this afternoon. And because we have another special guest. Come on over, bud.
Hi, my name is Caden.
Hello.
And he has a couple of questions for Dr. Tafur.
Hi, Dr. Tafur. Tafur, right?
Hello. Tafur, I say.
Tafur.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I was interested in studying genetics, chemistry, and ethnobotany, and I was wondering how those three subjects would combine in the future of medicine.
Yeah, interesting question. Genetics, chemistry, and ethnobotany. Well, I mean, if you study, I guess you got to pick something in college or whatever to go further with that kind of field.
Mm-hmm.
And if you study something like biology, or you'll study chemistry and genetics. So maybe something towards the biology side, and then the ethnobotany side is, I still think there's that, but then to specialize in the chemistry or the genetics, it's like that's a little more specialized. You can be interested in all three, but you might end up focusing more on one side, more on like the chemistry genetic side, or more on the other side, like ethnobotany, which is a little bit more about getting in the field and talking to people and finding out how they use plants and things like that. And so they mix, but I think at one point you go to one direction more than the other.
Yeah, it's kind of a lot.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a cool thing to be interested in. Yeah.
And then I was wondering the difference between what you would define the difference between substance abuse and ceremonial medical.
Right. Yeah. So the versus the using substances, like abusing a substance, a mind-altering substance, versus using some kind of mind-altering substance in a ceremonial way or in a sacred way. And I guess, that, we had talked about it once before, but the main thing is like whether the main measure would be, how you use it and what is it bringing to you.
Yeah.
So, the substance abuse is something that's bringing a problem. That's why it's called substance abuse. When people have problems with things like alcohol, it's because it's hurting their family, it's hurting their health, it's hurting their job, it's hurting their, they're getting into problems with the law.
Yeah.
It's bringing problems into their life. So substance abuse is, there's definitions around that, around how it brings problems into your life. And then the sacramental or medicinal or therapeutic use of something, let's say even where I mentioned alcohol, let's say somebody that drinks a little bit of wine for their blood, for their arteries and their heart, or that's their understanding. So it's bringing like improved health to them, how they use it. So, that's kind of a simple thing, but I really think it's about how you use it and what the outcomes are.
For sure.
And so that's why we have to educate people about things, because some things can be abused, but then maybe they have a therapeutic use. And then some things that are more therapeutic, let's say like ayahuasca, for example, throwing that out there. But we really don't see any major abuse history, other than there is some people that take advantage of other people with it. But for the individual, it's not commonly abused like the way some other drugs are. So, it's just things get kind of, I'm calling it a drug, but really that's a plant medicine in my mind. But it's just how things get thrown together, in the same category. Like somehow they're all drugs.
Yeah.
And, the last point I'll make around that is that my teacher, Ricardo Maringo, the Shipibo healer that learned to work with ayahuasca, from his elders, from their elders, from the generations, he's really offended, you know, that people would, because of America's kind of view towards things that have psychedelic properties,
Mhm.
that they would consider him like a drug dealer, you know, because he works with ayahuasca. And so his answer to that was like, you know, we did not know one drug until you guys showed up. We didn't even know what a drug was. These are plants. They grow right here. You can cook them together in a pot and make a tea
Yeah.
and use it to help your family.
Yeah.
Like that's what we're talking about. You know, we don't know what you're talking about. We had to learn that from you. So just that where it kind of gets mixed together, maybe that's not so appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really
Thank you very much.
appreciate that. I think that's an important distinction because, I mean, what we've imposed, I've seen that a lot in our system. It's like, you know, we can have a patient on all of these drugs that have a whole long list of adverse effects, but then we have somebody with Parkinson's that's using cannabis, and you'll see them with a cannabis use disorder diagnosis or a cannabis.
Yeah.
I've seen it often.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and I'm like, well, does he have a, you know, whatever drug, you know, use disorder too? Or, you know, I find it a little bit disturbing, and I think it's something that needs to shift.
Exactly. In other words, it's like, well, and it is shifting, but that's a great example because let's say, you know, the one guy says, well, it helps me sleep, you know, smoking cannabis or CBD or whatever that is. But then the other person is like, well, you know, I need to take antipsychotics in order to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And like, when does that start becoming a red flag? That's like,
Yeah.
you know, versus the other. It's like all of a sudden, next thing you know, we're on this Michael Jackson train, you know, taking these kind of drugs just to go to sleep. It's like, well, maybe something's wrong.
Yeah.
Whereas the other person who's just taking a little chamomile, or maybe they're smoking marijuana, or maybe they have a glass of wine, or, you know, maybe things aren't so difficult for them, but the other person is requiring like some pretty high power antipsychotics. Yet no one, you know, that's a non-issue, right? I mean, you've seen it where you are. It's nothing. It's just like, oh yeah, take it. You know, you need it to sleep.
Yeah. Despite having a long list of adverse effects.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, and I'm just glad that, you know, more and more of us are having these conversations. And I think that the public needs to hear this information in, you know, more than one way, like as many ways as we can get it out there. And I just really appreciate you, Dr. Tafur. Dr. Tafur. I've always said Dr. Tafur.
That's all right. It's kind of made, you know, because in Spanish that's a different sound, but in America I call it Tafur. That's what I've been saying, so I don't mind.
It's like Dre or Dryer, I guess.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay. But
Well, what do you say? What do you say, by the way? How do you say your name so I remember?
We usually say Dryer, but my husband says it's technically Dryer. But I don't.
Okay, but you say Dryer. Okay, that's what I thought. Dryer. Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. We're kind of like, we don't care either. Whatever you call us.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you coming on the show. There's some really amazing, you know, I consider the cutting front edge of, you know, a new paradigm in medicine. And I don't know how fast that's going to happen. I have no idea, but I feel like there's some shifts that are coming. I really do. And I'm hopeful. And I think I think that differentiation that people need to, more people need to hear that, because it was interesting when you brought that up about ayahuasca, that, you know, some people are abused, but it's they're going to the wrong person to give them the medicine.
Yeah, I mean, that's happening with alcohol. That's happening with a lot of stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Right. Every night is happening with alcohol.
Of course.
Across the country. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate those your responses, and so we're gonna splice this into the video, and everybody, it's gonna be perfect. So I really appreciate your time, Dr. Tafur, and I'm actually in your class right now.
Yeah, I know. How was it for you?
Great. It was our first night. My internet was a little bit patchy, but
oh, that's right.
I don't know. Yeah. People say it's Mercury retrograde. I don't know about that.
Yeah, that's what I hear too. Yeah.
Maybe it's just everybody on Zoom. I don't know.
That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thanks for. Yeah, I hope you liked it.
Class. It's a great class called the River Course that Dr. Tafur is teaching to many therapists, occupational therapists, naturopaths, DOs, MDs. You got a little bit of everything in the class.
Yeah. It's awesome.
yeah, I'm really I'm excited about the increased interest in,
Exactly.
we're going somewhere with it. So
That's it. There's people, there's tons of people. Yeah, you saw it. Yeah.
so I really
So
appreciate
good work you're doing too, to keep spreading the word and giving people more. People want to do it, they just don't know where to do it at, and I think that's it. That's what somebody said to me once. I was on the guy's podcast in Arizona, and he was just kind of a down to earth guy, and he got me on some discussion point, and all of a sudden I was complaining about like the 1%, and he's like, you know what, I don't know much about the 1%. He says, I know about the 99%. And he's like, the 99% that I know, this guy from Arizona, he says, they know something's wrong.
Yeah.
We just don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just getting people together to start talking about it and figuring it out together,
Because I think some of us do know what to do about it. And,
Yeah.
it's interesting because I had to have these thoughts going through my head right now that, my son's 17 and he's a smart kid that has an interest in helping people. And I have to worry that, some people seeing this are going to think that this is inappropriate. And, I really find that disconcerting. And I really hope that, that more people can open up their minds because, we've seen people healed from, frankly, the revolving door at the psych hospital is, an indication to me that some of the things we're doing isn't really, helping.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we don't help because I do see some people get better, but, I think that there's a lot of indications that there's a lot of suffering that is going
unaddressed,
Unaddressed, that's the word I was looking for, unaddressed. And I think that both of us are on the same thought process that if these were addressed, that a lot of the other problems would start to diminish or less, or maybe our system wouldn't be so impacted, and I think we would see a lot of changes. And so I really appreciate your time. I think you said you were traveling, so
yeah,
I want to honor your time here, but
yeah, thank you.
I really appreciate you coming on. And
Thank you.
yeah, this
Thank
is
you
good.
so
Yeah, no, nice to spend more time. All right, well, good. Well, thank you for having me on. I should get back to my activities over here. All right.
So
Bye,
Yeah,
much.
see you soon.
Have a good day. I'll see you next week in class.
All right, sounds great, Miranda. Okay, have a good one.
You too. Let's get started again. So I guess my first question about you, Dr. Tafur, is what made you decide to go from being a family physician into really deeply studying traditional Amazonian plant medicine and wanting to bridge the worlds of science and medicine, and spirit, spirit science and medicine?
Yeah, no, well, it's like I wrote the book about it, and it's something I talk about a lot. But basically, it was just getting depressed in medical school. Like struggling with the culture and just what it kind of brought up in me, and my difficulty, feeling like I fit in, my own spiritual tendencies and all that, and amidst the culture of how we were being trained and the way things were being run there. And I got depressed and I was struggling, looking for something to I hadn't really felt like that before. And I tried antidepressants a little bit. My dad was a psychiatrist and that helped me a little bit, but then I was just curious about something else, something more natural. And I kind of came off of that. And then I went to go through peyote ceremony at a place in Arizona. And I had a huge experience, a beautiful healing experience. And it really inspired me. Wow, I didn't know that was possible. For one night to be so impactful for me personally. So I started going back there. And then my family's from Colombia, and I had a lot of curiosity about ayahuasca. I had heard about it. In Colombia, it's called yahe. And I had heard about it. I had some family connections to people that had done research in the Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So then I was just thinking about it for a long time. Wow, peyote is like that. I wonder what ayahuasca is like. What can that do? And so I just kind of hung in there. I waited. I did peyote in 2000, 2001, maybe. And then I had to finish my medical school and residency. And after that, in 2007, I had an opportunity to go down to Peru, a few years later. Mm-hmm. And I had a big experience there and was really impressed with the kind of healing I was observing. I started going back there, and I started bringing groups there, and then I just kind of got involved.
Yeah. I mean, you actually helped open up a center down there, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah, there was Ricardo Maringo as one of the healers that we work with. He's the main healer, the teacher that had been working at another center and wanted to start his own center. And he asked me and a few other people, including Sveta Mamich from Canada, if we would help him. There were a couple other people, but they kind of dropped out. So it was the three of us. And we decided to start our own healing center there called Niue Rao. Centro Espiritual. So yeah, we founded it and ran it and worked it, for years. And then in like 2017, I started to step down from management there, and Spita and I kind of sold our shares to Ricardo. And so Ricardo's he's the sole owner of the center now. So he's a Shipibo shaman, and he owns his own big healing center in Peru.
So can you tell us a little bit about the kind of healings that are going on there and how that would differ, kind of like a play on the question my son asked earlier is, how are these healings in this spiritual setting different than, say, somebody who just went and like got a hold of DMT or, or just even like took the like I think it would be crazy to ever do, but like just to take it by yourself, like unfacilitated.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the major difference is that you're kind of like gaining the benefits of the culture and their experience with working with the medicine. So it's like, yeah, I guess you could like, figure out, I'm trying to come up with an example, like how to make, some pharmaceutical substance from the internet, and then there's like, okay, would you use it the way they use it in the hospital? So you got to imagine that there's like a very developed, advanced culture and understanding and experience around working with the substance and the plant. Mm-hmm. That the idea that you're just going to figure it out on your own because you figure everything out on your own and who really cares? It's like, it's a very naive perspective. Like that's somebody who really doesn't have that much understanding, In other words, it's like you say, oh, you want to build a house, but you don't know anything about building a house, but you figure it out. Yeah, you can figure it out, eventually. But yeah, there's a lot of experience. You could bring some people in that really know what they're doing with that, something that's been developed over thousands of years. Yeah. So it's like, a lot of people, they're not that interested in, in learning that much or expanding their kind of knowledge base, or maybe they just don't have access, But the main thing is that, yeah, there's a huge body of knowledge around it. So that's one of the huge differences. You're not just making it up on your own. You're doing it with people that have been doing it, for centuries, for generations. And they have a lot of experience on how to take care of people, on how to be careful with people, on what's worked and what hasn't worked, So you could say, oh, I'm going to do this, but it's like, you never did that before. Somebody was telling me, oh, they wanted to they're going to help a certain person. Let's say, we were just talking about some people with some kind of advanced problems, advanced, let's say, addiction problems, or let's say there's somebody else was asking me, they just had a sister coming out of like this heavy domestic violence situation. And so they think, oh, well, I'm just going to take them to, these guys because they get together and do this. But it's like, well, have they ever done that before? Have they ever helped somebody with that kind of problem before? Like, do they have any history of that?
Yeah.
Would you take somebody to a mechanic that's never, I mean, if you didn't, you had no choice, because of course you have to work with it. You got to deal with it. But it's like, there is a big difference, right? Between the person who's been working on cars for 30 years and their dad worked on cars and their grandfather worked on cars and what they're going to be able to do for you versus taking it to somebody that hasn't done that before, hasn't dealt with that. Maybe they can solve it. Some people are really good, it's like a car genius and they'll figure it out. But you run that risk and you lose that experience. Yeah. So I think that's the big thing for people to realize. And I understand that not everyone has access to that kind of culture and all that, but it's like, we're learning, we're starting to bridge, but just to at least be aware and to think of it that way, that it's not something the self-righteousness of like, I just got to figure it out, or I'm so desperate, I need to figure it out. You know, there's no like, then it's like, yeah, that might work. It might not, hard to know for sure.
Yeah. So that brings up a point when you say we're bridging. I mean, I know that you talk a lot about bridging, like how, like if we put spirit first, like what would the world be like if spirit was first versus science first, and why is that important?
Yeah, for me, it's important I talk about that because, you know, that came out of like discussions of me traveling with some friends of mine who are Native American, in particular this lady Belinda, who's Navajo and Zuni, who was just hearing this talk at these conferences of like people with the spirit and the science, and this idea that, you know, spirit is trying to catch up to science. Like that spirit is trying to catch up to science. Like we're just trying to, and that was just backwards, you know, she was saying that's why everything's screwed up, you know. And so what that means is that people, like, in a way, like science is their religion, and so they believe in science even when science doesn't necessarily have the answer. So it's like a matter of faith, you know. They think science will eventually figure this out, so we're just going to go with that. But that's a leap of faith. So that's a person of faith, actually. Like, yeah, sure, there's the established evidence and the facts that we're dealing with. That's fine. You know, I don't think the spiritual people are against that evidence. But then when we get outside of that evidence and the claims that people are making about what they know or what they don't know about how the world works, supposedly based in science, you know, then you start seeing that this is just a person of faith expressing themselves. They believe in science, that's their religion. And, you know, so there's a point at which there's like it's not quite as honest, because instead of saying, yeah, well, this is what we believe, like we don't know this, you know, that would be like a fuller description of what they're expressing. Whereas the spiritual person says, well, this is what we believe, you know, because of our personal experience and talking to each other. And so we feel this, we believe in this, and, you know, we respect the science, like that's why would it go against, you know, what's happening in the material world? We're not against what we're observing in the material world, but we're also not going to deny that we feel things that science hasn't been able to explain, that we experience things with each other socially that science hasn't been able to explain, and that we have even stranger, extraordinary experiences that science hasn't been able to explain. So rather than throw those out and deny those and say, well, I'm not going to talk about that stuff because we don't have a mechanism for how that exists, you know, then that becomes kind of a lie.
Yeah.
You know?
So because we can't explain it yet or can't come up with a formula for it, then we just want to pretend it doesn't exist, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
So the spirit first is the idea is like we're going to just have a very broad context for our conversation. In other words, everything is included. We're not excluding anything. We want to hear about everybody's experiences, all different kinds of experiences. We're not going to just, you know, poo-poo it, as they say, because it doesn't fit the model.
Yeah. I mean, I think it, you know, as I've worked for the last several years as a psychiatric nurse, you know, I really feel like one of the things I see is that, you know, the patients just often don't feel listened to. And I can't remember which speaker it was, but one of the speakers I had come on, he was talking about that. He said that's like the shadow of, you know, healthcare, and you know, and sometimes that's all these patients really need is they need somebody to witness them and to like hear their experience, and medicine keeps saying we don't care about your experience. You know, your experience is not the important part. Like we just need to do this medicine, and then, you know, everything's supposed to be okay. And the thing is, it isn't.
Yeah, that's it. And so what you're saying and what I'm saying is like that's a lie.
Yeah.
You know, to say that your experience doesn't matter as far as how you feel about your life, how your health, you know, it actually comes into being. That's a lie, you know. So it's like we get it. So it's like they're overworked and stressed out and overburdened the system, and they're not being cared for. You know, their experience isn't being respected of the actual healthcare providers. You know, whether it's the nurses or the doctors or the staff, you know, they're not. No one is. So they're just being like, hey, man, like, guess what? So same with us. Who cares?
Yeah,
you
no,
know?
totally. I
So,
mean,
right? So there's that attitude that goes all the way up. And so the problem is that's been this issue with the value system,
mhm,
because supposedly the reason everyone's going along with that is because it's in the interest of some higher up person,
yeah.
who's dealing with the money
Hmm.
and who's creating the job and giving the job.
Yeah.
And so everyone's like, well, I mean, their experience, whether it's buying a boat or whatever it is that their experience is all about,
Hmm.
like it's overwhelming to the people's experience working there.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of, but I mean, everyone's going along with it a little bit because of the whole money train. We think that that's going to take care of it. Like,
Hmm.
not only does your experience not matter, but money will solve the problem of your experience, or somebody else getting money, at least they'll get to solve the problem of the experience,
Yeah.
you know? And then the
Totally.
pill. So it's this over materialistic perspective, which is part of the issue with the whole spirit versus science. So
Hmm.
the science, we're saying it's all material,
Hmm.
nothing else matters. How we feel about it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So as long as the objective evidence is consistent, it doesn't matter. But then once again, that's a lie
Hmm.
because it's not true. And so when people, they might say that in some kind of academic setting, or they might say that in some public health setting, but then when they're dealing with themselves or their own families, their own children, their own loved ones, all of a sudden their experience really matters.
Yeah. That's so true. It's so true. And honestly, like I really see, I feel like a lot of people, like the public, they talk about, doctors and how great it must be. And, yeah, everybody, there's this view, and it's like, from what I see, I sometimes see doctors that are falling asleep in the room looking at, I mean, they're overworked, and it's, I see people who really want to care in the system, and people who do care, but a system that has been created to where it's not possible to make room for that. I mean, it's, really as a nurse, I feel lucky that I get to spend as much time with the patients as I do because it's an inpatient setting. And so really the RNs have the most access to the patients. We really see the most stuff going on. And, even we don't really have the time to, like I might get like, a 15-minute window where I can really sit down and, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's my scope to provide therapy, but I can provide therapeutic communication. And I'm a person, so I can listen and I can be a witness. And I have backgrounds and other things before I went into nursing, and many of us do. So we have other tools, but it's not really like part of
It's
the
not like
traditional
out.
care.
Yeah, no, and even though it is, right? So it's like everybody knows that the nurses being there with the people is crucial, to their care, but somehow that they don't bring that into the science study, like, okay, they were in the hospital, they received this drug, and oh yeah, by the way, the nurses were talking to them all day. And so that idea, that like that oversight of, once again, it's like, what is it really like to go there to the hospital, and who do you deal with, and what's your experience? It's like just the honesty
Yeah,
about that. And so
that's
then they want to like downplay it because it's like, oh, I don't know, the placebo or whatever. And it's just like, it's just, again, it's just kind of, it's not that impressive to me, because when push comes to shove and they have to go to the hospital, all of a sudden it's a whole other discussion. Oh my God, the nurses didn't even talk to me, or this happened, or that happened, and this. I feel terrible. How am I supposed to get better in a place like that?
yeah.
Look how they treat me. Or this other place, oh, what a great place
So
to be. You know?
yeah,
So these factors and their influence, that's the thing, like placebo effect. Well, we just because we don't understand like all the mechanisms around how that kind of like TLC, will help people. Does that mean that we're going to throw that out?
yeah,
Does that mean you're going to just hand your kids over to some robot that'll just give them the pill, give them a pill and whatever? Like, uh, you know, it's just not human.
yeah. I
So
yeah, I
why,
feel like that.
right?
The system that we've created doesn't feel human. It doesn't,
No.
It's like they've tried to rob us of the humanity of the healing process.
Yeah. So that's what we're trying to recover, you know. And so we're saying, and so again, you know, the spirit first, and you know, sometimes that rubs people the wrong way, or they're worried about religion or things like that. But we're just saying some kind of broader, holistic perspective. That is, we're talking about a human perspective.
Yeah.
We're talking about if this was a loved one, you know, of yours or you, like what would you hope for yourself?
Yeah.
You know, like simple as that. And
Yeah.
why can't that be part of the culture?
Like just having love be,
Just having love.
like we can't even, acknowledge that people need to feel connected, right? I mean, isn't that the
Right.
opposite of addiction is connection? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, and we don't even, I don't even think that we've taken that into consideration.
Well, it's, you know, it's you're right, but it's starting to, like, there's people trying to come up with research models and ideas to try to impact the mentality right around this stuff, because they just dig in their heels. And so it's like, why are they doing that, right? Because it's like, if it's not helping, if it's not working, and it's like, well, one reason is because they're just status quo. People are making money, they're doing their thing the way they're doing it. Another one is that if we bring the human and the love element into it more, then those people, that this is, I say this over and over again, it's like, if you haven't been held in some kind of vulnerable space, you know, where your people are gonna like take care of you, keep you safe, not judge you, and allow you to kind of like open up and process what your own life has brought to you. No one's doing that for you. You don't have an opportunity to seek healing of that kind. Then you're gonna clam up. You know, you don't want to go there. You don't want to unravel and melt down and, you know, kind of like face some of this, the way those things have bled into your own life, you know, not caring about your experience, you know, having to, whatever, close yourself off emotionally in so many aspects of your life. And so you kind of don't want to rock the boat. You know, they're like, what's on the other side of that?
Yeah, you're bringing up a really good question is around, if we have like an entire healthcare system, like the manning, the staff, the providers, the nurses, the doctors, the therapists, the social workers, the respiratory therapists, everybody, even down to the support staff, who turning patients or whatever setting you're working in. And if, we have all these people that they haven't received that, they don't feel connected. They haven't healed their trauma. They haven't had anybody witness their, issues. Like when we're working in this system that has providers that are really, I don't know if unhealed is the right, I can't think of another way to say it, or that, that still have wounding.
Yeah.
How is that?
Haven't had access to healing, you know, we could say.
Yeah, haven't had access to real healing. Like they're just, I mean, many of them don't even have time to think because they're so busy caring for everyone else. But how is that affecting the care that, for the end user? Because, I really like, the thing that makes me sad is that I feel like we have this system, and, because I know I'm on both sides of it. I have a son that has some condition, and like, I feel like we're working in this system where it's like, well, are you dying in 5 minutes? Is it terminal? Or are you going to kill yourself?
Yeah.
And, other than that, like your suffering is not really that important.
Right.
Chronic suffering, I'm sorry, man, we don't got nothing for you. Like chronic pain, I'm sorry, you don't feel good, no vitality. Like, there's no context for optimizing or
Yep.
like, how good can we feel, or you know what I mean? It's like,
I get it.
we're not dying, so you're good.
Well, that's the thing. And so, there's just two sides to it. And me as a doctor, it's like, you understand that taking on that responsibility that the hospital takes on, that the rest of the society, including many of the healers out in the society, don't take that level of responsibility. In other words, we're not going to turn anybody away. We don't care if you're trying to kill somebody or you're trying to kill yourself or you're, they cut you in half. we're going to try to deal with you. So then, when you have resources that are ready to deal with that, and there's a lot of people that need that level of care, that they're like, they are in life-threatening illness of different kinds in a big city or whatever. So then there's the burden of that, like what that really is, and the people that are dealing with that and facing that head on, and the trauma of that, and kind of like getting calloused over of like, look, that person's not dying, like, just let them go. Geez, we got to deal with the next person.
Yeah.
We got to be ready for that. So then, so trying to have some sympathy for the system, the doctors, the healthcare system of like, like I could say, oh, people won't, as I'm on like trying to be in the bridge work and deal with a lot of integrative healers or alternative healers or shamans or things like that. And they want to like tear into the doctors, and just be like, oh, well, how much, education did you get on, nutrition? Like, well, how much did you learn about nutrition? And it's like, well, I don't know. It's like, you want to go through the curriculum with us? They're some of like the most studious people in the country, keeping up with like the amount of material that most people just are not able to manage.
Yeah.
So it's like, when are they supposed to learn what you want them to learn?
Of course.
And when are you going to come in and take care of that ICU patient? When you're kind of like, so there's this kind of like armchair quarterback kind of thing going on that, the trolling that goes on. And then on the other side of it, you have the doctors being arrogant, saying, oh, well, these guys they're traumatized, they're upset, they're burnt out. These guys don't know anything. They're not going to help. They don't know what they're doing, all that trash.
Yeah.
That's not helping. So somehow there has to be more sympathy, I think, a little bit for what the doctors are doing. And then this kind of reality, which is kind of growing, that we're trying to promote more and more, is that, health for the culture shouldn't just be coming from the hospital.
Yeah.
People shouldn't just be relying on their, it should be a cultural thing. Like, everybody wants to eat healthy because everybody wants to eat healthy. And not because your doctor told you or whatever. Like, that's that's how when culture evolves, it gets to that place. And you see these places in Europe or whatever, where, let's say, people eat healthy and they don't have some of the same problems that we have here.
Yeah.
So you have this other, there's this cultural side, where the doctors are burnt out, like trying to tell these people who don't want to, have a unique disinterest in their own health, like compared to practicing medicine in other parts of the world, or these people really don't want to have anything to do with their own healthcare. Like, I'm not going to change my diet. I'm not going to change this. I'm not going to change that. So that the burnout of that. So then somehow, like, how do we get the culture more involved? And there is a lot of that going on, like with this podcast and other podcasts and a lot of people, YouTube. So now there's people not just waiting until they go to the doctor to learn about how they can improve their health. So that's really important, is that the education and all that extends. Like you're saying, like, hey, some people aren't getting this information, like, because of, you could say their culture, like, who do they hang out with? Who do they talk to?
Sure.
What kind of shows do they watch? So then we're trying to like penetrate into those worlds, like you're saying, for the regular people, like, how do we reach them and get them turned on to like this kind of thinking and showing them where it's about you feeling better. It's about your family feeling better. That's what we're shooting for.
I do. I agree. And I feel like there's this, I totally hear you. And it's like, and the trolling and it upsets me too. And I know there's nurses out there who complain about the doctors, but I have a brother who's a physician too. And I saw him, I'm like, man, he went to school for like 40 years, like 40 years.
Yeah.
And you're going to complain that he makes a paycheck and then, and that he's not doing this too, and that too, and this too. It's like, so I get it. And I think that, the people, the culture, we need to start to take accountability for ourselves and create our own. And so it's like, what medicine do we want? How do we, what kind of healing do we want? Because we're still going to have the life-saving, healthcare system.
Right.
But I think it could be augmented. Like, I think there's more we could do. And, especially in the way of mental health, and because it's rampant throughout the system. And I feel like we have a poor tolerance for anything behavioral. And, I think, that's a whole can of worms there. But, one of the things I wanted to ask you, like, about, let's go back over to the, your experience, because you have a lot of experience in integrative medicine, in traditional medicine, and in Amazonian plant medicine.
Yeah.
And, you know, I want to bring in, because I think this is another thing that we are, hopefully we're just now starting to accept, but I want to talk about like transgenerational trauma. I want to ask you, like, what is neurogenic inflammation? I want to, you know, I want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And because, you know, I think we all know, one of the things that I think that people are afraid of is that if we start to acknowledge that trauma is a reason for a lot of our problems, then we're going to have a lot of moms and dads going, well, it wasn't me, you know, I didn't, you know, I mean, and every mom, you know, I'm a mom who has a sick kid, and, you know, we do that to ourselves already, you know, believe me.
Right.
You know,
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
God, like what if I had that C-section, oh my God, like, you know, I
Right.
should have done the circumcision, you know, I mean, oh my God, I yelled at him when he was 3, like, you know, this is what we're doing. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that, like, some of this could be passed down, right?
Yeah.
So can you just like explain to us what is neurogenic inflammation, and
Yeah.
you know, how does that affect our genes and our epigenetics?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna like open with first just and that's like, you know, the spiritual perspective comes into play a little bit, because it's like at some point or another, whoever's fault it was or it wasn't, you know, we're born into this life and we have to deal with what we have to deal with ourselves. So then that's kind of like the spiritual perspective, or this, that there's a healing journey involved for all of us. That, like, you might be born into this some circumstance or that circumstance, and then some people are able to kind of heal through that, you know, and so like finding avenues, whatever it is they can do to try to be more holistically healthy and to enjoy their life and thrive, you know, despite the circumstance. So that would be actually some kind of like idea that we're that's part of what we're doing, you know, that's part of what we're born into, that we're born, we live, we will die. And so like in the meanwhile, you know, while the world is a crazy mess or whatever it is that happens, or maybe we were born, you know, some other time and era when things were even wilder and weirder and more difficult. And so what was the story of that person's life? Like, how did they, where did they get to, you know, in all that? Because some of them made it from me, wow, they went through this hell and they inspired everyone, you know, and some of them just kind of like, you know, they had a harder time dealing with it. And so there's all that. And so we're trying to learn about that. And there's the biological side of that, you know, so we were talking about before about how do we bridge, you know, so a lot of people, they want to hear the evidence, they want to hear the material, they want to see the proof. And ultimately, like we're saying, yeah, the spiritual kind of perspective, or the emotional or experiential perspective, like it should have evidence in the body. Why wouldn't it? We're trying to say it's real. And so why wouldn't it? So then you got this trauma, let's say the trauma that affects you from your own life, you know, from your childhood or whatever happened. And that some of that trauma, we're gaining more knowledge and understanding of how that trauma could imprint you biologically in a way that would stay with you. So that there'd be evidence of like this thing that happened when you're 4 years old, when you're 40 years old. You could see this imprint still there, because it's until it's, maybe it could be healed. But the idea is that it has to be healed for it to shift. That otherwise it will just stay there. It will just stabilize. And that there's other forms of that are transgenerational, intergenerational, so that there's some traumas that some ancestor, parent could go through that would imprint them in such a way that it would actually be passed on.
Yeah.
You know, and so one of the simple examples that I always talk about in relationship to that is like this mouse study that they did, where they showed that if you shock these mice every time they smell this smell, until finally just giving the smell makes them freak out, they go into fight or flight response, then that can be passed on for several generations. That the new baby just bring the smell to their face and they're going to freak out. And so they've shown they can track the epigenetic imprint. So in other words, where the DNA strand or the proteins around the DNA have been modified, imprinted by the trauma. How, when you go from the parent mouse and start making your sperm and making your eggs, how you would wash out a lot of stuff because you have to go all the way back to, stem cell version, but you would hold on to certain like information, certain data wouldn't get washed out and would be passed on. And then that would be the basis for some of what we understand as instinct. That the new mouse born into a new, so the parent moves to a new ecosystem, new forest, they end up there. They, over the course of their lives, they track, oh, that hawk is scary. Oh, that smell of that berry is good for us. Some of that stuff registers so that they already know when they're born into it. So that's instinct is part of where this transgenerational trauma like blends into our biology. So then you have experiences, like we said, those would be adaptive, modifications. And then you have the maladaptive modifications where something's happening that's not giving you an advantage. It's just kind of burdening you, So we have the other example of Rachel Yehuda's work in Mount Sinai studying concentration camp survivors from World War II, and then their kids and their descendants, that they're saying, well, these guys have more of a tendency to be anxious, or maybe even depressed. They have mental health problems. And the prevalence is higher among the descendants of the concentration camp victims versus people from that part of Europe, controlled. It's not the same. And that they can show, they're starting to find like epigenetic imprints that may be being passed on from that trauma. And now, so that kid is born kind of adapted to be careful with concentration camps or people in uniforms or whatever it is, whatever way that imprint plays out for them.
I always call it epigenetic scarring because that's what
epigenetic scarring.
It's like a scar. I mean, it's like a, that's how I feel. That's like,
yeah, that's a good way. I like it. It's what it is, scarring, So then the scars, which are inevitable at some degree of life, there's going to be some scarring, So then the question is, well, how do we have healing to try to keep the scar from making us like dysfunctional? Yeah. So you can imagine somebody who has a really severe arm injury and, it scars over in a really tough way and now they can't use their arm versus some, whole setup approach where they're going to manage the connections of everything and manage the scarring process so that they retain function as much as possible. Like that would be bringing a more holistic approach to the thing. We're not just going to be like, okay, it's just this bone needs to go there and that bone needs to go there. Like, no, actually, there's some really fine points here. This, we know this has to go this way. And there's kind of a geometry of this. And then there's the fine stuff at the cellular level that we know that if you give it a little bit of this or a little bit of that. So it starts becoming much more refined and like we'd say holistic, multiple dimensions of it. And then like, oh, actually, and if the person's having a good time and they're having fun and, maybe they do a little dancing with that arm and it does better than we would have expected. So it's like the holistic management of the scarring process. So there is trauma. And then that's a whole, I was involved in studying wound healing. So there's wound healing is a study of like how do wounds heal. And there's a series of things that happen of steps. And some you can get stuck in this acute inflammatory phase and it doesn't advance you. So you have to help people pass that. Or you can get this chronic inflammatory phase and these old wounds and ulcers that don't heal, So it's like, here we are in this, the wound healing, scarring is part of that process. So at the end, you have the scarring. And then you have some people, they keloid, and then the scarring gets out of control. And then how do we manage that? Because now the scar is going to get in the way. Yeah. So all these different steps in the healing process. So when, the mouse is terrified of the smell, so then the question is, so now it could be a big scar because maybe they're moving into like, now they're born in a place where that smells everywhere. And now they're freaking out all the time. Yeah. And they can't live their lives because of this conditioning. You say scarring, another way to talk about conditioning that's happened. So how do you decondition them? Is it possible to decondition some of this imprinting? And what are the signs of like some of this maladaptive stuff? So one of the neurogenic inflammation you were asking about was like, okay, so now the system, let's say in this case, like the immune system, there's something going on in there that's causing it to overreact and create inflammation when there's no, like we'd say, there's no injury. It's not like someone just hit them with a bat. There's no infection. There's no bacteria or something that's triggering the inflammation. The body's generating it itself from the nerves. The nerves, it's like a nerve impulse, like some bad memory. An example would be from the smell. You get this sympathetic fight or flight response that leads to some kind of inflammatory response from the smell. And so the concept that I kind of talk about in the book, because I applied it to a few different kinds of cases. I said, oh, well, look at this migraine headache case. And then they said that one of the things they're learning is this like neurogenic inflammation of the blood vessels of the brain. There's some inflammation coming there it's coming from the inside out. And then they saw the same thing in the idiopathic chronic cough. This person has this cough. They already tested them for everything. There's nothing wrong with their lungs. It's coming from their nerves. It's coming from inside somehow. And then like maybe psychologically, you say emotionally, and then you have the Crohn's disease case. Similarly, they have neurogenic inflammation that's generating all this inflammation, this inflammatory bowel disease. Again, they don't have an infected thing. No one's cut them open. And so it's like it's coming. And so it's where is it coming from? So this idea is this smoldering inflammation from some unprocessed trauma is the idea. Like the body's thinking, oh, we're preparing for something's bad's going to happen. We better be ready over here. And then what you see, at least in these cases, and that was part of like my theory, is that when they go through a deep emotional healing process, and all of a sudden that neurogenic inflammation calms down, they have less headaches, they have less cough, they have less diarrhea and abdominal pain. And so something actually shifted in their body physically that likely could be measured. We're just tracking the symptoms around what we understand the mechanisms to be. And it's like, okay, something changed. And while then we have to get to people's experience, because we can say, oh, well, the mechanism, we don't know what happened. Oh, placebo, blah, blah, blah. You can just blow it off, which is great if you don't care about anybody who had one of those problems.
Yeah.
But if you care about somebody that has one of those problems, you're actually listening very intently. And you're going to get that person out of the way. Excuse me, sir. We heard your like.
Can I hear what this guy's saying, please?
We heard I would like to hear what happened.
Yeah.
To you.
Yeah.
And then you find out, oh wow, like they healed this deep trauma, Yeah. And that's what, like, when they're going through that process, is all what would allow this thing to shift and relax. And so is that, to what degree can we gain benefit from that?
Oh,
we don't know, is that the answer to different kinds of mental health problems? How do we deal with autism? How do we deal with these things? But our thing is that, well, it's part of the optimization. If we know we have a problem that we're not making progress with, and let's say we know there's some kind of neuroendocrine involvement, some autonomic disturbance, fight or flight disturbance, emotional disturbance. We know that. So it's like, okay, well, we should try to address that side of things to see if we get like an advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could just see how, like, if this can help somebody with chronic migraines or Crohn's or this, these pulmonary problems that you were talking about, like, and we're like, well, we can't really point to the mechanism. So, I guess it's not, we can't widely apply it, because we can't figure, but it's like, we have so many things that we don't even know the mechanism of the disease, so it's like, why does it matter if we know the mechanism of the cure or the healing?
Yeah, especially if we're being careful and we're being responsible and we're like, we're going over we use the Western approach to rule out, they checked out their lungs, they did the CAT scan, they did pulmonary function testing, they did, we made sure that we're not missing any of the known material things.
Sure.
So we're not being irresponsible.
Yeah.
So now it's like, okay, now we're in the gray area where you've admitted that you can't help them anymore. Or you said there's nothing we can do. There's nothing that can be done, which maybe we could translate to like, you don't know how to help them past where we are.
It would be nice if more people would actually just verbalize that. Like, what, I don't know if I can help you. Like, I think we need more.
Yeah. That's extremely important. That's extremely important. Just that phrase right there, like what we were just saying. And that's the part that's missing from, we're saying, the over arrogance, where people, the doctors end up rubbing the wrong people the wrong way, and you get all these trolls and all that stuff. It's because they don't, rather than just say, you know what, like, that's as much as we got. Like, hopefully, maybe you could find somebody that can help you past this. I'm not aware of that. I don't know about that. I don't want to give you false hope.
Sure.
But I could say that, like, this, we can keep doing this. This is what we can offer you. not sure how much it's going to help. I couldn't, from my experience, it may not help that much, but is there another possibility? Which
Yeah.
is kind of like what, that's the whole thing with my book is that whole arrogance piece is like, okay, you have this Western perspective that doesn't want to hear it from, Native Americans from the Amazon. I just think, oh, these guys, what do they know? They don't know anything. Why would I listen to them? What a waste of my time. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
that's what they call the structural racism and things
Yeah.
like that. It's the same thing in all the different aspects, whether there's gender stuff or whatever it is, where people don't want to open their minds because they're just settled into whatever they're thinking.
Yeah.
Because and a lot of times settled into the thinking because of what we were talking about before, the scarring.
Yeah.
When people are really set in their thinking and like have a hard time opening their minds about things and learning something new, it's can be scarring related. It could be a little bit of a red flag.
Well, we have these websites. I can't even remember the name, and I don't want to give them credit, but they're those like the hardcore science, like that they just want to cut everything else out. I mean, they don't want it in our medical system. They don't want people to know about it. So they're kind of like the other end of the trolls. And, I think to myself that, almost every day I click on, we have these like medicine reference, that like if I'm passing a medicine, I need to be able to click on the reference, like if they have a question or if I have a question. And so that I always have access to my pharmacology at all times. And, do you know how many of the medicines I look at that just say right there that they don't know the mechanism of action?
Yeah. But that's what we were talking about at the beginning, is this like faith walk, So these people are pushing it like kind of like fundamentalism.
Yeah.
They're swearing that they have all the answers and get that stuff out of here, and to the point of like anger, to the point of violence.
Oh yeah, they want to take.
And I'm saying now we're talking about scarring again. We're back in the scarring zone, because when we start going to this other thing about your experience and how important that is, and we think that's useful, and maybe we should consider that, if we find out it's malaria, and maybe we'll just give you the pill for malaria, and let's call it a day. We're not going to get, that's fine.
Yeah.
But something else, where it's your depression or whatever it is, and then we start saying your experience matters. Actually, we kind of need to hear about it. And again, this person has not been held safely in the vulnerability and the non-judgment, and so that is very terrifying for them. So what you're seeing is, like, to me, without overstating it, but I do feel this is my experience. That's a very broken-hearted perspective. That dig your heels in, like, frothing at the mouth over. And that is an emotional expression. Like, no, if it was a dog, you'd be like, whoa, what'd you guys do to that dog?
Well, that's a good image for some of these, some of these posts that I've seen on these, they're very angry, like rabid.
Rabid. So like, to admit that rabid is an emotional, so when we get into this emotional biology and bringing the experience of emotional biology forward, it's like, okay, wow, that person is really like hormonally like blowing up.
Yeah, they don't even want to have people have Reiki. I mean, it's like, let alone plant medicine. They're like, Reiki, how dare our insurance, let a person with cancer have a healer come in, how dare they?
Well, and so then, but you got to, then there's a compassion piece where we have, again, the whole thing is about getting back to case by case and real people. And the humanity is like, what happened? Did you have a loved one that had cancer that got convinced to go this alternative route and it didn't help? And so now you are really angry and you're like, man, they tried to convince us, and then we should have done this. I should have done the chemo, whatever. So it's like, these are really hot topics.
Yeah.
It's like very hot topics around people's death and dying of loved ones. And so there's room, but again, I think people can get carried away, and that's where the internet and the social media can get kind of like out of control, because it's so easy to just troll a little line on there, and it's like, it's nothing. Like, to me, I don't know, people react so much to that. And it's like, what did the person do? They just sat at a keyboard and just chick, 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 chick. That's it. Like, why are we making such a big deal about this? They didn't do anything. Just threw out some words. So I think it's also, you can get a little exaggerated, where people would get so emotionally involved in these threads versus, like, if you really care at all, like, and I know it's hard now with the COVID, but, like, talking to somebody about cancer treatment, like getting families together who've dealt with it, to talk to each other about, well, I tried this and I tried that, you know.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot more, like, again, the maturity of the dialogue is like you have to kind of a little more accountability.
Mhm.
Like just sitting there ranting on a keyboard, it's not really doing that much for
Not a
the
good use of
society.
time.
Yeah, it's overstated, like what,
Yeah.
the contribution.
Yeah, really, really. Well, I want to just ask one more question while we're here. And, well, I might segue into something, just for a second, because I do want to bring in, you talked about peyote at the beginning as well, because I feel like personally, like there's a lot of emphasis on ayahuasca right now. And I mean, I think that it's very healing, but, I feel like there's other plant medicines, there's other, and there's other medicines used in a therapeutic setting that are starting to get, I feel like there's things opening up. So I guess that's the question is, how do you see the future of this, like as far as access to
Yeah.
the public,
Yeah.
and and not just focused on ayahuasca, but also MDMA assisted therapy,
Yeah.
peyote, psilocybin mushrooms, things like that.
Yeah. I think, well, first with the peyote, that's been kind of a hot topic. And, I think we first have to respect the Native American community here that's kind of asking people to not promote peyote use because of the scarcity issues around peyote.
Okay.
And so while people are trying to figure out how to use peyote more sustainably, there's a lot of other options. So, one of them, like San Pedro, is a cactus that grows very easily in the Southwest, that there's traditions in Peru around San Pedro that it also has mescaline. So some people are exploring that. Like, what about San Pedro? But that's all. And then as far as plants, then there's the ayahuasca and other plants. Then you have, like, on the clinical side, you have MDMA research, very impactful, extremely impactful for PTSD, using it therapeutically. Again, where we started, what's the difference between substance abuse and therapeutic use? Well, a lot of people have used MDMA at raves and festivals and had a good time, but they didn't really heal any trauma. So that's like, wow, but if you go with these people who are advanced experts and working with it and they have their protocol and they know how to help people through, they're having really amazing results. So that's a perfect, like, kind of thing to kind of look at, what your son was asking about. So like MDMA psychotherapy, that's getting looked at for autism. MAPS is opening up studies on that. Yeah, they're saying like autism is kind of an emotional sensory integration problem.
Yeah, totally.
And so they started that. I mean, you should check it out on Maps. I don't know where they're at with that, but they have begun that exploration.
I will.
So it's just that, you know what I mean? So that's a whole different thing versus some dealer at the festival who doesn't really care about autism, whereas these other people are like, wow, how can we really use this to help people? So there's that, and that's, on its way to becoming FDA approved. I don't know, it gets a year or 2 years or something. We're doing research with the MDMA trial, the Modern Spirit Epigenetics trial. We're trying to raise money. People can check it out. It's all about the epigenetics of trauma and healing the epigenetics of trauma that we talked about. So people can check that out, modernspirit.org. But then there's psilocybin, the mushrooms. So those are going to be a lot more easy to access, a lot easier to access in the United States. MDMA stuff that's going to come out through the studies, psilocybin, mushrooms. The chemicals that they're using for research, and then people exploring mushrooms is pretty prevalent, pretty easy to access. So those are probably going to be leading the way, in psychedelic psychotherapy in the United States, I think, and some other people's explorations and use.
Yep.
And then you have things like San Pedro, which people are still learning about, and then then there's the other stuff that's coming into the world on the medical side is ketamine. So ketamine, which is an anesthetic, which dissociative anesthetic, which some people they think now, or they use it recreational, their K-hole party thing, that whole thing. But then you talk to the people, again, dedicated practitioners, and they're saying, wow, while we're waiting for MDMA to come out, while we're waiting for psilocybin to get FDA approved, we started using ketamine with people, and we've realized that we can get to some of the same stuff.
Yeah.
So again, it's about the dedication of the healers and the people involved, and their dedication towards getting people better. Not because of their dogma or their, it's like I work with ayahuasca, I train in ayahuasca and plant medicine, other plants, master plants in Peru, but it's like I'm not telling people don't try MDMA because I think ayahuasca is really interesting. It's like, wow, that could be really help you.
Exactly. There's different, and I do want to bring up, one thing, and I just like to bring this up because, oftentimes there's platforms that it's mostly all medical people they're listening to, but I feel like there's going to be a wide variety of people that are listening to this. And I want to really make that point that, I mean, first of all, I've had patients that have had great success with ketamine and they tell us about it all the time. But as far as like the difference between therapeutic use and, doing it in a rave or, and I don't even know if this is true, but it's like, I've heard that MDMA, if it's not like properly made, that it actually, like if it gets too hot or or cooks like it could actually turn into bath salt. Like I don't know if that's true. That's something I heard, and maybe you can let me know, but people shouldn't be messing around with this stuff on their own. Like
Well, I think bottom line is that you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So you're getting a little pill and you don't know, unless you have like access to the people that actually made it and developed it, or some kind of testing capacity to see, to prove what it is, and like trust and credibility in the testing process.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that's something that everybody knows has been messed with, since people are trying to make money. And so they sell something.
Yeah.
It just depends on the scruples or whatever. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of risk and there's a lot of danger. So when we're talking about MDMA assisted psychotherapy, we're not encouraging people to just seek out that stuff. It's about the research and those people with their labs and trying to come up with something that's really not harmful, something that's safe or as safe as possible for people. And yes, there are risks in the community, and young people, they need to wake up. It's like, come on, you wouldn't just
can't
take
get
it.
to buy stuff on the street.
Yeah, it's just
You
like,
can't. It's dangerous.
It's dangerous is the fact.
Yeah, we've got fake Xanax on the street. We've got fake MD. We've got fake everything, and it looks real, people. So it's like, I do want to, bring in the safety factor, because I know a lot of people are really interested in this medicine, and some people are frankly desperate. I mean, there's many people who are desperate for healing, and so, it's my hope that we keep getting more and more access, and and more education. And I've been hearing things kind of like through the grapevine that, we're about to see some shifts, and, that there is going to be more access. And I hope that's true. And I just really want to encourage everybody to really do their research and be with, medical professionals or traditional healers who know what they're doing. You don't just go to anybody. You don't just fly to Peru and find somebody. It doesn't work that way.
No.
Yeah.
And that's back to the accountability thing. You can't just be a fool.
Yeah.
You can't just be a fool that doesn't care about, complaining to the doctor because your lifestyle is not together. I mean, obviously you need help. There's reasons why people struggle with that. But that's just like, yeah, you're going to have to eventually, one way or the other, get the support, and then, you need to try to get yourself on track in all the different ways that we need to get on track. So there's accountability involved.
Yeah.
So it's not enough. And so even if you're desperate, it's like, that's maybe not always the best time to seek something like this, especially if you don't have the right support, you don't have the right network.
Yeah.
It could really cause a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And it's not the answer for everything. Yeah. And just because you're here to help this person or that person doesn't mean it's going to help you.
Exactly.
You need to know a lot more about it than that in general, to heal. It's not just something.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why, we have several people that came on that are talking about these plant medicines, but there's also many people that are talking about other somatic healing. And, I want to see more of this coming into medicine,
That's extremely important. I think that's the psychedelic stuff is kind of what shone the light on that. Okay, people need to get this like deeper emotional stuff healed. They need to get the subconscious side of their being, healed. And so what are these other things that are getting people there that don't run the risk of, taking bad drugs or getting involved with the wrong people, or, having a really terrible experience that without any hope of integrating it? It's like, well, there's breath work, where people are getting into altered states of consciousness that are helping them access the same kind of stuff. Yeah. There's, we see people make progress with trauma healing with something like EMDR. Some people do make progress with therapy. Yep. Some people do make progress with other forms of like spiritual approaches, whether that's spiritual practice like meditation. Some people are exploring that kind of stuff with like here with Sweat Lodge and different kinds of community support. So there's so many aspects. And so that, to me, that's the whole point of my book. Is like, it's not about everybody should do ayahuasca. There it is, the book, Fellowship of the River.
Yeah.
It's like, what is the role of spiritual healing in modern healthcare? And what can we learn about the example of people going down to Peru? What did they find? Okay, so let's help them find that other ways.
Yeah.
We can find it that way, great. Otherwise, let's help them find that other ways, because we need some way to address this epigenetic stuff, this neurogenic inflammation stuff, this emotional body issues, you know, and trauma.
Fight or flight, you know, our over sympathetic system drive that, you know, is really almost everyone, you know, really sadly in the West, we're constantly in fight or flight, you know, living in constant states of stress. And, you know, really it's my hope that we start to see more of these things integrated into the mental health system, like as far as, and I'm talking like like I think EMDR should really be standardized. Like I don't even think you should be able to be a therapist anymore without being trained in EMDR. That's my personal, like, you know, talk therapy is not cutting it. That's my, you know, and I think we could do more. And I also think, you know, you're right. Like the general public needs their own accountability. You know, we can't just be like, well, why didn't my doctor teach me? Because he, you know, he was learning how to do heart surgery, or he was learning how to do this, you know, he didn't, like, it's not the doctor's job to do everything.
That's it. You know what I mean? There has to be other avenues.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's just important for everyone to consider that and think about that and support each other in that. And like what you're doing, you know, is trying to figure out how to reach the community, educate the community. And, you know, that's what, like me with the course, it's like, let's start talking to the healthcare providers.
Oh yeah, I'm super excited. I'm going to be taking Dr. Tafur's course coming up pretty soon. Yeah. It's the river course, and I am really looking forward to that. So I'm actually super excited. I'm super excited to be joining with other, like, all kinds of people, occupational therapists, MDs, NDs, nurses, you know, RNs, nurse practitioners. There's all kinds of people that have been showing up to your
so that's what we're trying to do, get those people together and kind of help network, you know, and come up with it together, because that's what we're dealing with. Like, how we started this is like, man, the whole thing needs to change, like everything's screwed up, and like how do we change the whole culture? And then the truth is, it's like with each other through community. Like that's how cultural movements happen. It's like we need to get people together, talk with each other, network with each other, figure it out like organically.
Yeah.
And then we'll come up with stuff, because by ourselves, or just like I said, just typing some words into the keyboard and thinking you did something, it's like, it's not enough. You know, we need to like kind of help each other figure it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you guys, this has been Dr. Joe Tafur. He's author of The Fellowship of the River. It's an excellent book. I would definitely check it out. And then also the founder of Modern Spirit, and that's www.modernspirit.org. And that is his nonprofit organization. And I really look forward to supporting that, your nonprofit a lot more in the future, Dr. Tafur. Like, I really feel like this is something I want to support, and I'm going to find ways to do that. And I hope everybody here checks it out. So thank you so much. It was awesome having you on here today.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Martin.